Hey y'all, welcome to Old Time Jam Basics. Okay, I'm gonna start on the guitar, and you have to make sure that you're all tuned. I just tuned, but if you didn't, then go ahead and do that now. And in the meantime, if you are already tuned and you're sitting down to a jam, there's a high chance that someone is gonna have to tune, especially the banjos who tune in between every tune, even if you stay in the same key. Which you do for the banjos, and you're gonna have to get used to cracking jokes and listening to old guys talk about the origins of tunes that you don't really care about, but the rest of it is pretty fun, so we're gonna get into it. The first thing that you need to know about old time guitar is that it has a very distinctive rhythm. That's the most important part of the old time guitar. It's primarily a rhythm instrument. Once you get used to it and you start getting bored in tunes, and you can start adding bass runs and maybe you can do little solos, but that's really more of a bluegrass thing than an old time thing. So the rhythm is key. And what an old time rhythm is on the majority of tunes, unless they're a waltz, is a boom chap, which sounds like this. So you're gonna have the first note, the top string, or the bottom string. It's the bottom string. I always mix that up because it's on the top when you're playing it, but it is the lowest string. Will be your bass note, and then you're gonna pluck that and strum the rest of the strings in that rhythm. So when you put it all together, that's what it sounds like. And you'll notice that I'm alternating between the top bass note and the second bass note. So really what I'm doing is alternating between these two notes. And so when you're in a jam, that helps to keep the beat. And especially if you're in a kind of faster jam, that that rhythm can get pretty complicated if you're not used to it. And if you can't alternate between them, if you're too new at guitar or if you're too new at old time, then it doesn't really matter, just pluck a string. You can even go back to the first string and just do that. That's really common. Again, the number one thing that you're focusing on is the rhythm. So just make sure that you have that down, and the rest of the jam will follow. The fiddles are the ones that'll be taking lead, so they'll be focusing on melody. Guitars and banjos are mainly rhythm. Banjos can be melody too, but as long as you have that groove going, then you're fine. And we'll get into how fiddles can keep a groove too in the second part of this tutorial. That's pretty much all there is for old time banjo, honestly. You're only ever gonna use 3 chords. You need to know G, you need to know C, and you need to know D. And it doesn't hurt to know A or E, or F. But if you're in an old time jam and you know G, C, and D, then if there's a tune that isn't in the key of G, then you can just capo to whatever fret you need to be at. And if you don't know which fret to capo at, you can probably ask someone next to you, or if you see that anyone has a capo, you can ask them. And old time is a really inclusive and forgiving community, so you can kind of not know what you're doing at all and still have a good time. So if you are playing an old time tune, the most likely way that the chord structure is going to go is you're going to stay on the 1 chord. So if we're in the key of G, that would be G. And you're just going to stay on it for a long time. Maybe you'll go to C. And back to G. And then if it's a fancy tune, you're going to go to D. And then back to G. Yeah, so you're just going to do a basic 1-4-5 progression for most or if not all old time tunes. And then once you start getting more comfortable with that, you can start adding bass runs. So a bass run from G to C, which is a pretty common progression. Sounds like that. So all I'm doing is I have the G, and then I walk up to the C. So we can do that a couple times. Get ready to walk up. Walk up now. 1, 2, 3. You can do it on the way down too if you want. 3, 2, 1. From any chord, and you can just kind of figure out what notes sound best to you, and that takes a lot of practice. So if you mess up your bass runs, or if you don't hit the right notes, or if you don't feel confident in them, then don't worry about it, because everyone's there to just play some tunes and have a good time, and nobody is really paying that much attention to if all the notes are right, because everyone knows a different way of playing the same tunes anyways, so there's always going to be some differences. You can walk down from the D. Yeah, so I hit the top bass note there twice on accident, which doesn't matter. Yeah, playing old time music is like painting with Bob Ross. As long as you're having fun, that's like you're doing it right. That's it. That's the requirement. All right. That's pretty much all there is for the basics on the guitar that you need, assuming that you know how to structure chords and you know how to recognize patterns, but we'll get into that more on the fiddle too. So just a really brief overview, and you can watch this video back and practice along if you want, but a really brief overview. Get the boom chuck rhythm, alternating those bass notes. Walk up to the next chord if you want. It's completely optional. And the only chords you're gonna have to know are at most 1, 4, 5. A lot of times it's just 1 and 5 or 1 and 4. And that's it. That's all you need to know for old time guitar. So we just have a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna call my lovely assistant up so I can show you how to follow along on the fiddle. So if you're playing fiddle and either you don't know very much about fiddling, or let me get more in frame. Either you don't know very much about fiddling, or you don't know much about old-time fiddle, this is what you're gonna need to know. That's good enough. Nobody's gonna be in tune anyways. All right. So if there's a G, can you just play like a basic 1, 4, 5 chord structure, like the G and the G? Yeah. So yeah, if we're going with a basic, like what I just played, the basic 1, 4, 5 chord structure starting on the G. Yeah. You're gonna have a couple options to start. So you can start by just droning on the G chord. Keep going. And that's all you need to do. And then if you hear that it changes, so you can do some basic drones like that. If you want to make it a little bit more interesting, you can add some chucks, so like then if you're trying to figure out the melody, let's say, that's the melody that you're trying to figure out. That's kind of complicated when you first hear it, but if it's played over and over, so go ahead, play a G chord. Then maybe you recognize that the first, well, it starts on the third finger on the D string. So you can just play that every time it comes around. You can just... And if you start with notes like that, if you start with one note that you can get every single time, then every time that tune comes around, you're gonna be able to get that note. And after you've gotten that note solid, after you know, I can play the first note of that tune, then you can move on to the second one. Where does it go after that? You have the third finger on the D string. So it goes from the third finger to the first finger on the A string. And that's all you do. You just figure it out note by note, and eventually you'll start to recognize patterns. The same way that you can recognize patterns in chord structures, you can recognize patterns in melodies, because old time uses a lot of the same phrases and a lot of the same kinds of phrases, and they all have lyrics, and a lot of times the lyrics in old time songs will just be borrowed lyrics from different tunes, because what happens is it's passed down by ear, and so people forget the words or they forget the phrases, and they'll just kind of substitute for whatever works in the moment. So what you end up with is, after hundreds and hundreds of years of these tunes being passed around, it's just a bunch of tunes that sound really similar because they all borrow parts from each other. This is really nice in jams because you can kind of just drone. So if you play the G, that's just using the first two notes that in that entire tune. And that would sound pretty good with 90% of the rest of the tune. This tutorial is a little bit long, but that's okay. Yeah, well, so we'll wrap it up because it's getting a little bit long. But this is just like your basic 101 old time jam basics. You can use that word again. It's fine. Yeah, so to review, on the guitar, you're going to have the boom chuck melody, exactly like that. Most people use a pick, but if you want to be a rebel, who's going to stop you? And then you're going to use a basic either 1 to 5, 1 to 4, or if your tunes are fancy, you're going to use a 1, 4, 5 chord progression. On guitar, the things that you want to remember is to keep the rhythm, keep that beat going, keep the groove going, make sure that you're keeping everyone on time. You can stomp your foot really loudly if you want to. You can do that if you're on fiddle as well. I do that all the time. Just slam it down there. Make sure that everyone knows what the rhythm is, because especially if you're playing with a really large group, it can be really easy to get off rhythm. On the fiddle, the things that you want to remember is that you can always drone. If you don't know a tune, you can always drone. You can figure out the key and just honestly, just go up, do a scale on your fiddle until you can figure out one note that sounds good. And once you find that one note, play it until it doesn't sound good anymore, and then find another one. If you want to learn a tune, it's pretty much the same thing. You figure out one note and then you figure out the next note. And every time the tune comes around, you can play that one note you know and pick up another one. There's an old saying in old time music that if you don't know the tune by the time this jam's over, you haven't played it long enough, which is true. You just play them songs a lot. You just repeat them, and they're very simple. Which is why I end up doing a lot of bass runs. I end up doing a lot of cool rhythmic things on the fiddle, because you find ways that just get you in the groove and make it really interesting for yourself. Yeah, old time's a really great place to start getting into jams because it's pretty low stress. Nobody's gonna judge you for messing up, and it's all just about having a good time and enjoying the music. So I hope that helps you if you ever find yourself in an old time jam. Thank you to Will for assisting. All right.